Okay, hi people, can you hear me? Okay, hi people, can you hear me? Okay. Okay, so welcome to People Management EB consultation space. So it's 8 right now, so I think we can just start. Okay. Okay, so I see some familiar faces there in the chat box. So welcome to these spaces. So if you have any questions, you can just type in chat box. So after finish one section per session, then I will go and review back like for the questions that you have asked. Okay. Cool. So a little bit of content is that this consultation space, we are going to like just go through roughly on like why PM and then how to do PM as PM supports organization, and also what are the things that like PM should focus on. Okay, so I think for talking about why, it's always related back to the clarity of who. So I think regarding clarity of who, that's a topic that we have been mentioned for many times, is that uh, that's the ultimate essence of like who we are as Isaacer. So just some recap and refresh of the process is that as an Isaacer, you will experience and receive team standards, and then from there you learn competence and you understand uh, and lives Isaac values, and then from there you experiences inner adult journey, and you therefore you develop leadership qualities, and all these processes is enabled through global learning environment. Okay, so there are like 6 different global learning environments. So the thing about it is that, uh, when we are talking about this clarity of who is always related back to the existence of PM. So why is it so? Because if you look at these are things that has been mentioned in clarity of who are the things that the elements that existed like leadership qualities, values, competency, and these are the definition of it. So ultimately, like leadership qualities are the things that we want to develop in our members as well as EPs. So values are what distinctively define us as and differentiate us as Isaacer, and competencies are the skill sets and mindsets that we should have in order to achieve a 2020. Okay, Isaac 2020 aspiration. So that's why in order to achieve 2020 is the sole it should be the sole priority of membership. It is not our product, hence not our way to engage and develop every young person in the world. So if you're curious about it, you can definitely look through the resources that I will share later on. So just a little bit background check, just some information is that membership used to be one of our product, just like GT and GV. So if you really want to know more about it, check it out the resources because I will be sharing the resources. But in this space, telling about like why PM existed is all coming from the criteria of who. Okay, so clarity of who is the main reasons of why PM is assisted. Because as people management or globally, like most of the entities, we call ourselves like talent management as well, is that with the we call ourselves as the head of people, and therefore everything that is related to membership, it relates to us. Okay, so the question is how to make clarity of who happen. So uh, in terms of process of how, PM or TM measure of success. So if you look at the role of TM is that we are the persons to predict outcomes, diagnose problems, and prescribing actions on people's side that will add value to business and membership. So I think one of the things that I always tell my people, or the thing that I learned as becoming a LCBP TM previously, is that if we want to be good at our role as LCBP TM or PM, I think the main thing that you have to switch is always your mindset. You have to be like the second LCP, or you have to treat your LCP as your best buddy to always think from the bigger picture of your LCs and for the organization. Because if you look at the role of TM, as mentioning here, most of the time is that you are like the consultant for the people in your LCs to give them solutions to solve their people issues in every functions in LCs so that it would add value to the business and membership. Okay, so it's not only for membership, it's not only for business, but it's for both. And again, a reminder, that's the existence of why like criteria of who happens, and that's the final goal that we want to achieve as people organization to act to support and enable like 2020 ISAC 2020 to happen. So that's why last year we introduced like TM processes to the network globally, and currently like in ISAC in Malaysia, we also started to actually introducing TM processes and also start implementing TM process. Okay, so the idea of it, the intention of it is that also like never forget about most of our membership is volunteer, but as talent management, we have to constantly improve our TM process to better serve membership value proposition. So as you know, value proposition for membership is always like professional and personal development, and second one would be international exposure and team experience, practical learning experiences. So that's why TM always serves these two purposes, again, like business strategy and membership strategies. Okay, so the questions here that I think most of people would ask me is that who would be the best people for TM and who would be the best profile for PM? I think for every entity, definitely there will be there will be different need for your own LCs. But what's more important is that this would be the guide that how we are going to do TM in every LCs. But this wouldn't change, like this whole thing wouldn't change. So the thing about it is that in TM role is not only taking care of one aspect and neglecting another aspect, but most of the time it's just like the yin and yang is that we have to make sure both things are juggling between both aspects, and both aspects would come hand in hand. Okay, TM will never be good if you just focus on one thing over another or prioritizing one thing over another. Like if you're only prioritizing your membership experience without taking care of your performance, definitely it wouldn't happen in that way. Because until the end, people will only feel productive and fulfilled if they have performance achievement. So that's why both processes should be coming hand in hand. And if you think from business strategies business perspective, is that people who, if you are constantly striving for excellent results without taking into consideration your members' capacity, your members' experience, and it wouldn't last long as well. So it's just a very basic customer experience, but you treat your members like your customers, but the sole intention and purpose should be aligning to A2020 to achieve A2020. Okay, because ISAC Assisted is not only to serve our membership to develop themselves, but ISAC existed because we want to develop more impacts to the world and develop more leaders in the world. Okay, so that's why how do we ensure every ISACers achieve their goals? Most of the time, when we talk about business strategies and membership experience, therefore it's when we're talking about they are coming hand in hand and we have to juggle between both aspects. That's why achieving their goals would be one of the elements that we're focusing a lot, entirely in PM network. That's what we focus a lot, as in achieving goals are not only indicating that in terms of exchanges numbers, but it's also on their responsibility at different layers, like as members, what's your responsibilities in achieving your goals. And these goals also mention about personal development goals in PDP. And therefore, by measuring how productive they are is actually one of our measurement in PM. So there will be team leaders' responsibility, if you know, team standards, building, performing, closing phases. And team standards has been one of the biggest emphasis since previous MC's term, Sufei's term. So things that didn't change in current term is as well as the same thing, but what makes it a little bit more we try to establish TM process in this term. Okay, so therefore the main MOS measure of success of TM should be percentage of members achieving their goal. And how we are going to do it, definitely being excellent in TM process. Second thing is that we develop our people, one of the develop elements. And the last part of it is that we engage and keep our talent. So every processes TM processes. So for your information, there should be 4 elements, but not 3. It will be get, develop, keep, and report. So if you look at the elements in TM processes, they are actually connected to each other. Okay, so sometimes it's not possible to just be very good at GET. That's what I personally experienced, is that there's no use for you to be super good at GET, but you're actually not doing your performance management that well. Eventually, no matter how great your talent that you have been recruited, they will still leave eventually because they don't get the equal uh, experience that they actually sign up for. Okay, so moving on next would be like the what aspect. So there are two things that I've been mentioning just now would be the TM process and also team standards. So the thing about it is that most of the time, like people are very confused about these two elements. It's just like people will be very confused as in what's the relationship between TM process and team standards. So if you look at these both things, and just to wrap up again, the criteria of who. So if you look at criteria of who being an ISACers, is that team standards play a huge role in ensuring like we develop our leaderships and we ensure that every member's experience will be good. That's the objective of team standards and the intention of implementing team standards. So, and we also know that what's TM responsibilities and what team leaders' responsibility. So I think the thing about it is that TM process existence is to support team standards to happen in every team. As just now you mentioned, team leaders' responsibility is to implement team standards, and therefore TM responsibility is to implement team standards, TM processes, so that until the end, you are enabling your team leaders to implement team standards in your LCs. Okay, so therefore the assistance of PM, if we talk about like the assistance of PM, why PM, is because the assistance of the criteria of who. And therefore, if you look into the whole chunk of criteria of who, when we mentioning about team standards, and therefore you can connect it back to like the reason why PM existed in the first place and why TM process existed in the first place is to support team standards to happen in every team. Okay, so a very simple layout timeline that you can see between like what's the, I think the confusing part always comes in, especially when we have a lot of words that are called performing and performance management. So people will get very confused. So what's the difference of it? So the difference of it is that if you look at team standards, it's very clear cut. Building, performing, and closing. And building only take 10% of your terms, same as closing only take 10% of your terms. But in performing phase, it will be like take up 80% of your time. That those are the routines that you have to carry out as team leaders to your members. Okay, so I think everyone is very familiar with team standards. So the thing about how TM process like should be delivered by talent management or people management in order to support team standards to happen is as below. Like according to timeline, how get, develop, and keep should happen in every LCs. Okay, that's ideally what should happen when we are mapping out with team standards timeline. Okay, so routine and timeline of PM. So if you look at product phases, like every product or every functions, you might see the whole chunk of timeline charts, like from maybe January to December, what are things that would happen. And I think one thing that is slightly different in back offices or in between back offices and front offices, I think the major difference is that there's a lot of routine job in back offices when compared to front offices. Definitely, there are certain things that is non-negotiable, needs to happen also in front offices, but that's just the general picture on like the differences of how we function as back office, PM or FL, and also with product people. Okay, so therefore, if you are familiar with TM process, get, develop, keep, and report, I think only get would be one of the process that has timeline. And if you know, I think when we talk about get, one of it that people will be most familiar with definitely is MRD. Okay, but if you look into the general picture of get, is actually to understand thoroughly what's the HR movement and control in LCs. So talking about that, it will be a membership review that needs to happen like in a quarter basis. It's either based on your compendium or is based on your performance. So, and what would happen after membership review definitely is reallocation. probation, dismissal. And if those processes happen, and if you see that there's a need for you to recruit talent, then you move on to recruitment. And another thing that I think most of us we always neglected is definitely promotion and R&R. So promotion only happen when needed. For example, if you see that these members are very performing and there's a possibility that these members can be promoted to be team leaders without waiting for a term to reach, like without waiting until election or selection process to happen, and there's a need to have these team leaders in the team, then promotion actually can happen. And it's the same. And the thing about R&R is that it's either promotion or R&R. Both things are quite similar, and definitely the approaches will be very different. So if we focus back in recruitment, is that MRD should only happen when there's a need to fill out the talent capacity gap. So that's in note number 2 in a yellow box. So the suggested timeline to having MRD definitely is January to February, the end of January until the beginning of February. That should be your first MRD that happened in your LCs. And May to June should be the time that you only recruit for BD helper. So for LCs that are running IGV, then you might know that always in IGV context is that there are always not enough manpower or capacity during value delivery peak period of time. So the boxes in gray, like those are the time that BD helper recruitment should happen. And the next batch of recruitment that should happen, like for general, is during August and September. Okay, definitely recruitment timeline would be different based on different LC's academic timeline, but the ideal picture of recruitment is that recruitment is a process. Get process is a very timely affected, like it's a very timely factor. It's always affected by time, and there is a timeline for get. So the thing about get process is that whenever that you are doing get in your LCs, even though you are not having synergy with marketing, even if you are running it by yourself. But the thing about get process is that every time when you choose to recruit people, every time that if you made a decision as VPPM or LCP to recruit people for that functions, one thing that you have to compensate definitely is your capacity of your team leaders in LCs. Okay, if you be it like you like it or not, once you decided to run MRD, it would affect your team leaders' capacity because your team leaders have to be involved in interviewing, in onboarding, in selection. Those are the processes that would take up your team leaders' capacity, and your members will be very distracted by MRD itself. Okay, therefore, MRD should be only happen when there's a need to fill up the talent capacity gap. First point. I think second thing is that, if possible, is to minimize the number of MRDs that will be run in LC. Okay, therefore, MRD wouldn't be the first priority to make sure there are people in LCs, but it would be the last options actually. Because when you have MRD, people are going to be very distracted by the process, and people are not focusing on what they should be doing in their own function. Trust me or not, if you are curious, then I think you can go and compare your LC's results during different period of time, and then based on that you can know like how it is like validated by your performance in LCs based on like MRD timeline. Okay, so therefore the intention of making sure MRD is happening in January to February, August and September is to make sure during August and before September is to make sure that your MRD timeline is not clashes with your OGV extraction timeline. Okay, so next for develop is that so if you look at get just now, is more on like getting the right people in the right functions at the right time. So for develop, if you see the elements of it, performance management, capacity building in terms of team leaders, members, and functional, these are the elements that are actually closely related to building and performing phase of team standards. Okay, so if you look at the breakdown of the elements that I mentioned in performance management and capacity building, then I think you will be very familiar if you are team leaders. That's something that you always see in team standards trackers. Okay, so if you look at it, is that those are the routines that needs to happen, like how often you should be tracking PA, how often PDP review should happen, how often calibration meetings should happen, and how often, like for example, your R&D space for team leaders, members, and functional R&D should happen. So those are things that you have to take note. Okay, so the thing about develop process is that there are certain routines that needs to take note. For example, calibration meeting and also PDP review, I guess. So calibration meeting is one of the routine with team leaders to ensure that you are using the space to do performance review first thing. Second thing is that you ensure that your team leaders are being committed in fixing your people issues in like or their team issues through that space based on the data set that you have collected in from different channels. Okay, in that, what do you want to know about calibration meeting? That's another story. So, but generally, calibration meeting is one of the routine that you need to have with, it needs to happen with team leaders. So usually it can be called as your EBMT meeting, or it can be called as your team leaders meeting. Some people call it as leadership meetings. I'm not so sure what you want to call it, but the idea of it is just a routine that needs to happen in your analysis to make sure that your people like talent review can happen, performance review can happen. Okay, so PDP review space. I think second myth is that PDP review should happen monthly during one-to-one spaces, and quarter review of PDP only happens during quarter months. So what do you mean by quarter months? It's already there stated: February, May, August, and November. So and it's the same for R&D spaces should happen frequently if needed according to operational timeline, team standard timeline, or membership and members experience timeline. So conference it will be part of it, like members R&D, team leaders capacity building spaces would be like the spaces that you only have for team leaders to teach them maybe facilitation skill, one-to-one skill, and functional would be like the usual one. I think everyone would be very familiar, basically teaching you functional skills. Okay, so I think for developed elements, most of the time is that generally the reality of every LCs right now, I guess, is that PDP is something that people are struggling with, same as PA. Okay, so the thing right now is that PA and PDP are us. They are sort of the fundamental of performance management. Why is it so? Because when we remember when we are recruiting members, when we talk about membership value proposition, we are recruiting members based on do you still remember your talent attraction? I don't know, like your tagline and stuff. If you want to develop yourself, join ISAC, for example. So the thing about it is that we use personal development as a selling point, but the ironic part is that we never do proper PDP review consistently. So the thing about it is that if you look at our retention data, if you look at the engagement survey data, PDP elements is always the lowest one. So I think that's also the part that definitely it would be most of your LC's main challenges because PDP implementation in LCs are not that good at current moment. Okay, it's the same with R&D implementation. Okay, so moving on to KEEP element. The elements in KEEP that maps to performing phase of team standards are R&R, succession plan, and engagement survey. So those are the routines that needs to happen. So if you look at, the things that have, I think you would see again like calibration meeting there. So calibration meeting is connected to get, keep, develop, and report. So you will look at it like for what is connected for report element. So R&R should happen at LC's level and also individual team level based on team standards. So for internal campaign that should happen weekly, for R&R and for system establishment, it might be minimally at a quarter basis. So system establishment is more on like your LC's level R&R. So those are different things. So if you look at team standards element, R&R is one of it. Like how are you recognizing and acknowledging your members' progress? So those are the things that if you look at R&R, is closely related to performance management. Because you cannot reward a person if you don't have facts and data proven that this members is actually doing something. Okay, because once you do it without only based on your feelings and based on your perception or assumption without facts and data, most of the time it will backfire. Okay, because your personal feelings and your judgment are very subjective. And it wouldn't be a healthy thing in the team if continuously that happens. Okay, so second thing is about succession planning. So everyone, like I think in this current moment, everyone is crazy about pipeline nurturing. But the thing about pipeline nurturing is that it needs to happen weekly through team-centered touchpoint. For example, the best one example is PDP review. So PDP review, most of the time team members will ask you like what do you want to do after Isaac, for example, or what do you want to develop in Isaac. So those are things that are actually enabling team leaders to do better succession planning and also pipeline nurturing since the moment members has been recruited. Okay, so engagement survey, it would be the launching of engagement survey or calibration meeting and TL capacity building. So there are certain things that are actually overlapping, but if you look into every objective or elements, then you will know better on like why they are actually connected to each other. For engagement survey is because so for engagement survey should be released monthly, because the thing about the objective of having engagement survey is to make sure that the effectiveness of team standards implementation by team leaders has been measured through this survey form. So I implement is one story, how my member perceive is another story, but you cannot take literally on what team leaders feel things that they have been implementing as take it as the one and only benchmark, because if the team standards implementation is not effective, then it actually doesn't serve any purpose and it's not achieving any intent like the objectives of having team standards to be implemented in the first place. So therefore, I think engagement survey should be something that has been needs to be launched monthly to better understand like how's your team standards effectiveness in LC. Okay. And lastly is report. So for report part, I think it's very easy to understand. Basically, it's just reporting part. So, but the thing about reporting part is that instead of focusing on only the process of collecting data, I think another main takeaway that I hope everyone can take away from this space is that if you look at the trend of PM, how it has been evolved since 2 years before. If you are curious, you can ask definitely your current LCVP to compare with their previous LCVP, what they have been doing in LCs. So the changes of role has been very drastic from the start that they just need to do engagement activities in LCs, and maybe a little bit of I think it's mostly like engagement activities and also GET process. That would be their main priority. Moving to implementing team standards and doing performance management. And at this half of their year, they are trying to do a lot of like people analytics. So playing around with data that they have collected through team standards, engagement survey, and also performance management. Those are the things that the role evolved to the part that you have to be very good at analyzing and also making drawing inferences and conclusions from the data itself. So but definitely one thing to take note as well is that data doesn't mean anything if there's without context. So I think that's the important part of why until the end, every LCVP PM, you still need to be very ground to understand what's the reality of every team. Every team as in the team status, the team states, or the team leader states, and the effectiveness of team standards implementation, because until the end that would define on what would be the way that you support them back in doing better in their team standards so that they can achieve better and ensuring their members' experience are good. Okay, so for reporting part, definitely other than data collection, I think utilizing of data would be the main objective of reporting and also documentation. So for example, like recently I was asking like the team leaders, LCVP PM, that can you get me like past 3 years data about your MRD? And I think most of them like couldn't give me anything. And when we're talking about like conversion rate in recruitment process is very important, as well as like what's your productivity rate in for every functions in different years and different period of time. So if we don't have data, we cannot compare, we cannot see the trend, and most of the time you will be just banging on the wall and doing the same mistakes that what other like the previous LCVPs has been done. Okay, so therefore I think to summarize it again, so is how like these 4 different slides is to show how's the routine and timeline for PM in terms of like get, develop, keep report and how it has been mapped to team standards element. Okay, so I think just that. So it's Q&A time. So do you have any questions? Okay, let me see. If you have any questions, you can type it in the chat box so that I can read it from there. Okay, I will wait for another 1 minute. So you have any questions, just ask, okay? I can see like there are a lot of KP people. Jixian, you bring your whole gang here. UKM is here as well. JB is here. Okay, so there's one question regarding members reallocation. Yes, there will be one framework. There will be an education space for members reallocation tomorrow during PM commission meeting. So if you have any questions, if you are elect or if you are potential elects, then I think you have to ask your LCEB current to attend, or you can actually join the space if you are interested to know more. Okay, that's for monthly. So from YSIM is that may I know how R&D spaces can be conducted? Okay, so I think for R&D spaces, it's okay. So for R&D spaces, there are a lot of different spaces, right? So if you're talking about functional R&D, practical learning would be the most effective one. So regarding like how to conduct practical learning spaces, I think it's in Team Standards Tracker. Just need to look at the notes. So for members R&D, I think when you started to recruit your members, you have to already know like what kind of L&D is needed by them. Like when I talk about L&D for members, it's most like they are mostly like those basic general educational things. Okay, so for example, for members L&D, it should most of the time like how we actually conduct L&D, if you based on the 6 different GLEs, it would be seminar method when you do one-to-many, like facilitation, and also conferences. Okay, so another way of doing members L&D, it can be conducted also in team environment when you basically it's just like different facilitation skill. So when talking about team environment, it's more on like using your functional spaces to actually recap, or one-to-one spaces that to actually recap what they have learned from there. Okay, it's the same for team leaders capacity building. Team leaders L&D is usually we always emphasize a lot on seminar method, like one-to-many. Most of it is like I don't know, like conference. I think conference will be one of it. But the thing about it is that if you look at the different GLEs, I think that's the things that we can actually play around with. Because like for example, talking about asking people to reflect on their strengths and weaknesses, it will work better if it's a one-to-one spaces. Or it might be better if you have a learning circle environment. So those are things that you can actually find it up on the resources on how to enable like different GLEs to happen in a team, like in your R&D spaces. Okay, so for I think I hope that I answered to your question, Waisim. So if you need to clarify more, you can just type it down more. Okay. So for teaching wise, she asks that okay, what if we do not have enough candidate and the candidate who apply, we don't have confidence towards the person, personality problem, should we take in or we just leave an empty seat? Okay. I think it's regarding selection. Okay. So I think it's regarding selection problem. It's true as well for is very true also for member selection. So should we take up these people if like this person have a very serious personality issues, or I would say like behavioral issues, or maybe their behavior is not aligned to what you want in the team or in your LCs. So for me, first thing is that if the members behavior and value is not aligned, I would say not to recruit them, because you cannot fix a person's behavior and values in just 1 year time. Okay, that's how that's actually how organization works as well. They don't recruit people that have misaligned values and behaviors to the organization. Okay, so if you look at how Isaac recruit, we basically using the recruitment methods of a very comprehensive and complete recruitment methods that to ensure that we get the right people in the team. So therefore, talking about should we just leave an empty seat, for me is I think that's also one of the major skills that team leaders have to learn is structural management. So talking about if you look at recruiting people into your team or into the LCs, you see them as resources. Okay, just like when you're playing a chess, if you lose one chess, you have to find another stuff to replace it. Okay, it's just like empty spots. Like it's just like playing games is the same. I think. When you're talking about playing around with the resources that you have, look at like how people run startup. Okay, Isaac, we have okay. I think one thing very funny that you see in Isaac is that we are at a startup scale, but we have MNC structure. So the thing about it is that if you look at startup, 3% running a startup, they can get maybe like 100K income or net profit. But the thing is that why Isaac cannot do it? For me is that I definitely don't think that it's just because we are students that easy. But I think sometimes it's also on like the skill and knowledge that we have in terms of playing around with the resources that we have. So if you have an empty seat left open, the thing about it is that you just need to make sure that this empty seat, what this person initially or this role initially needs to happen, you just need to delegate it or make sure that another person take it up. Okay. I hope that it answers your question as well. So for Jai is that what kind of team leaders capacity building space can be done by PM other than downscaling team standards, PDP, and PA? I think what kind of team leaders capacity building spaces definitely is based on okay, the intention of having the end objective of why team leaders capacity building is there is to enabling team standards to happen in every team by the team leaders. So in other words is that TL capacity building spaces is there existed is because you want to enable your team leaders to be able to implement team standards. But the thing about it is that most of the time PM would only use the space to downscale as in teach you how to use the tool, carry the bigger picture. But exactly on if you look into every element of team standards, there are different skills that are actually needed by every different team, different processes and elements. So for example, conducting a meeting. So what kind of specific skills that the person needs to have actually. So if you read through it, uh, what would that be? So actually breaking down elements by elements, it will help you to give you a clearer picture of what are the skills that need to be taught to team leaders just to make sure that they are able to deliver team standards in their team. So for me, if you ask me team leaders capacity building spaces, definitely it has to be related to team standards because that's the objective of having team leaders capacity building spaces. Okay, but talking about downscaling this word is that do you just tell them what they need to do or do you teach them how to do? Okay, because one of the main, I think one of your main stakeholder, if you are LCEB PM, is that you have to take care of your team leaders learning as well, because they would be your main stakeholder in cooperating and collaborating and help you to achieve your MOS. Okay. So how can MRD affect the team performance by Kaipun? It would definitely affect team performance, as I mentioned just now. First thing is that your members will be very distracted by MRD process because you will need people to go for a booth, you will need people to be involved in coordinating this, attending this and that, and you will need your team leaders to be involved in selection process, onboarding process, or induction, attraction. Those are things that you would involve your whole LC members to be in. And therefore, looking into realistically how LCs do operation is that if you are being distracted by MRD by 2 weeks, if your attraction period is 2 weeks, basically your members are not going to do anything in 2 weeks. Plus minus, okay? They might be doing something, but it's not doing at their full force. So therefore, directly, it definitely will be affecting your team performance. Okay? So from Adam is that, can you give some insights if everyone in your LC is disengaged without dismissing them? So, okay, so disengagement of LCs, I think disengagement of members, sorry. So disengagement of members, first thing that I think, okay. So the thing about disengagement of members is that one thing to look into it, because you mentioned about without dismissing them, but still I have to tell I have to still give you a clear picture on like why people are being disengaged if it's not because of value or behavioral alignment, where they are the people that when you're recruiting them, you know they are fit to the picture, you know they are fit to the organization, and you know they are the suitable people for this function. So that's the assumption of it, okay? So therefore I don't dismiss them because of those things. So if that's the case, then I think uh if that's the case, I think first thing is that you have to make sure that you set a very clear expectation with your team leaders. Because when talking about disengagement of members in LC level, and when I talk about members, it's team members. So if you look at like the whole organizational chart or structure in our LCs is that you will have your LCP could communicate with your LCVPs, your LCVP communicates with your team leaders or directors, and then your directors will be the one that directly leading your members. Okay, beautiful picture, but there's a lot of communication needs to happen. So the thing about engagement of members is that uh, it might sound very cliche, but I would say team standards implementation of your team leaders towards your members, because as I mentioned just now, team standards is meant to engage your people so that your people can perform and knowing what they are doing in operation. Okay, so the thing that I have shared to my PM network previously in newsletter is that when I was having a very quick research on internet on what does it mean by engagement in organization, those are all team standards elements. The first one they mentioned is that get the purpose clear. Second thing that they mentioned is training, which is related to our L&D. Third one is reward and recognition. Like you have to make sure that you acknowledge the people's that are doing good. And then the fourth thing is that you have to keep talking about engagement in your team. Okay, so I think it has been very obvious that team standards would be one. Team standards is one of the method for you to engage your people. I can guarantee if you go and find on articles and stuff like ways to engage your employees, it would be exactly the same or part of the elements that has been mentioned in team standards. Okay. So how from Jai is that how to ensure every team leaders implement a quality PDP to their members. So I think for Jai the questions to I think the answers to you is that quality PDP of members, it would be, if you want to look at a longer picture, a longer term picture, it would definitely be your retention rate and it would definitely be your productivity rate. Because if PDP is happening, is setting in a good way, your members definitely are going to be productive because they are very clear on what they need to do in their operation that will contribute to their own personal goal, and they will feel very satisfied, and therefore in like the final MOS of it would be they are going to be very productive. First thing, when I'm talking about being productive, is that they are achieving their goal and they are performing members. And third one would be they are going to go for leadership position. Okay, but not necessarily they are going to for team leader's position. I think like under different circumstances there will be different cases. So, but for me, productivity is one of them and measurement. Okay. So for Karen is that how if members even more trust VP compared to his or her team leaders? Let me see. Okay, how if member even more trust? Okay, I think first thing that I have to look into is that whether in the first place, when you are recruiting these funds from members or when you are forming a team with these team leaders and members, is that do you all make it very clear like who are their direct team leaders? First thing. I think second thing is also on like are your members clear that these team leaders would be the persons that would be the main responsible to communicate with them. So sometimes I think most of the time is that in LCS level is that if we are not getting the communication line very clearly stated and communicated and briefed to our members, they are not going to know. Okay, so for example, if imagine that you are members going into an organization and then you have one VP standing up stage and then telling you what this function is about, and then your first impression is that wow, okay, this person is going to be my team leaders, right? And suddenly you come in like, okay, so suddenly you introduce like, okay, so this is the director of who, and then this person would be in charge of your team. But the thing about it is that sometimes is that, but do you state it very clearly? Do you state the obvious to your members that this person is going to be your final, like this will be your direct team leaders, and I'm just a functional like VP, for example. I was just in charge of my directors. So the thing about it, I think, is not to, I think sometimes it's not entirely a bad thing because, but I think using trust is a very huge word. So the thing about trust is that you can actually break it down into many different elements. Is that is it because like this person is losing trust on the team leaders? Is it because reliability issues? Is it because of accountability issues? Is it because of different layers of trust? Okay, so it might sound very hard to understand right now regarding trust, but if you can go and Google regarding like anatomy of trust, then you will find a huge by Brené Brown, like explaining what trust is. So I think that's also the thing, the aspects to look into, whether is it because your team leaders has filled your members has not been fulfilling what they have promised to their members in the first place. Therefore, the team leaders are losing their members' trust. Okay, because most of the time, accountability issues is one of the main issues that would causes your members to lose trust on your team leaders. Okay, so if your members are like trusting the VPs more, I think the good thing about it is that you definitely have to make sure that the team issues has been reconciled by having this VP to host the space between like the team leaders and members. Okay, I hope that you get it. If not, then definitely you can PM me to know more about it because I'm interested to understand more on the context as well. So for Jiaying is that for Summer ISP preferably to target IGB or OGA members, is it possible to make IGB members potential ISP? Because if is their realization. Okay, so for Jiaying question, it's interesting because I think I just brought this issue up to MCs as well. So I hope that okay, ideally is that I think if you look at the new thing that we have been launching in the new IXP things that we have been launching in the network is that we hope that IXP can be there in our projects to do like part of the seeder's job. So which means you are managing IR at the same time you are having exchange, right? So if you look at that context, is that it would definitely be very useful if your IGB members can be there and then contribute back to IGB. Okay, so in depth on, I think in depth on how like should IGB members be potential IXP, I think there are many pro and cons, but I think I can only give you an answer after this discussion with MC. So just to make sure that the information communicated is not like very messy and stuff. So I will definitely get back to you, Jai. Okay, anything else? We still have like 7 minutes. If you have any questions, you can just ask, okay? And don't really think that your questions is what is very newbie or anything. Like just ask because I think if you have the concern, most probably 1 or 2% in the space would have the same concern as well. Okay, Harold, what want to know about these two? So I assume that this is IXP, right? Okay, sure. Once we have the information, I think I will still we will definitely do a very huge internal comp. So don't worry about it. Uh yeah. And then from Adam, what would you do if your LCs lost all of its membership, leaving only less than 10 people working with you? Okay, I think uh first thing is that Adam, I think you can talk to Iggy because Iggy started his term with very few people from Kuching. And if you look at how Kuching has been progressing right now, it's very on track. And I think they are slowly getting better and better in terms of membership qualities as well. So for me, it's going back to the basic is that you only recruit people that are aligned to what you want to do because it will requires more of your effort in solving all those issues. But would it be better? I think the questions to ask you back is that would it be better if you spend the energies to solve all the misalignment issues in driving more results or in getting more like creating more impacts to your own like community and stuff? Do you understand, Adam? Like it's more on like uh the quantity isn't a problem at all, I think, because uh if you have this amount of membership, definitely you are not going to aim for like 100 realization goal and stuff. But instead, like I think with this number of people, just make full use of the people that you have, the resources that you have, and look into what is the realistic goal that you can set for this bunch of people. Instead of begging people and members to stay just because you want to make up the number, And until the end, I guarantee that you are going to spend 50% of your time in your term, 1 year term, to just solve your people issues, and that's very bad. Okay, because you can actually use your energy and time in something that will bring you more rewards and results. Again, like it's all resource management, so you just need to be more conscious in the way that I think just one question to ask you back whenever that you are having you need to make any decision is that the only way to solve problem? If put away all the possibilities or the concerns that you have, then is that the only way to solve problem? Okay. So for Chichen, another question, what kind of synergy FL and PM can have other than promoting IXP? There's a lot, I think. IXP is one of the thing. I think IXP, okay, yeah, I think when talking about promoting IXP, the underlying factor, the underlying intention of why we are promoting IXP is because we wanted to make sure that our members can experience what our customer experience, first thing. Second thing is that they will develop themselves through the journey that what we have been advocating to our customer all this while. Third thing is that they are going to be more customer centric and obsessed, okay? Being more empathetic towards our customers. So that's are the three elements. That's the reason why PM is promoting IXP and why IXP is under PM, because it's membership experience and it's membership development. So if you look at the underlying factor of why IXP is being promoted that's aggressively is because of that. Then therefore when you come into FL and PM synergy, is always go into R&R, members development, and also I think mostly would be these two aspects, R&R and members development. So when talking about members development, that can go into many aspects. Like for example, in terms of are you going to like have conferences? First things, that's one of the investment for members development. Second thing is that are you going to have are you going to ask like host like some special educational series for team leaders or for members, just for them to develop, and definitely those topics needs to be relevant to your operational first thing, and second thing is that it will contribute to your performance. So therefore if you look into the synergy between FL and PM is that both functions are playing a role where they need to they are managing resources, such as the type of resources is different. One is people, one is finance. So when you combine both things, most of the time is that what's more direct is that how can you use money to develop your people and make sure that your people perform. Very simple, right? I think this analogy. Okay. For Jiaho, is there any GCP so far from the network of let LC members to be aware of the PA, team service, and PDP, and how you drive to let people to make everyone do the tools? So, okay. So I think one GCP is that I think every LCs has been passed through that stage. Let me see who are the LCs. I think definitely JB would be one of it. JB, KP, Sunway, and also TU, I guess. UPM are there as well. Who else? CU is there as well. So the thing about it is that I think implementing PA, team service, and PDP, right? It doesn't start just in these 2 months' time. Okay, that's the first thing. If you look at the efforts that Sufei has been putting in for 1 whole year just to make sure that there are certain LCs that are doing it, it takes a lot of time. Okay, so therefore I think talking about it is that be more aware of PA, team service, and PDP from the way that if you're looking those as tools to be fulfilled, then I think that's the first thing that you have to cross-check whether for you yourself, do you trust that these things are going to be benefits? I think always like talking about implementing and downscaling processes, I think what needs to be very clear from you as here, quote unquote, you would be the person to communicate the changes to your people. So the thing about it is that always have to get the intention or the objective very clear, okay, so that when you're communicating it down, you remember your objectives, and then when people are asking you questions and stuff, I think it would be easier for them to take it in as well. So I think most of the time it's just the downscaling process went wrong. First thing is that do we actually listen from them on what do they need the most? Are we solving their problem? Second thing is that third thing is that do we actually review the effectiveness of the process with them? Okay, so talking about implementing all those processes, first thing is that again, do we listen to them first? And then second thing is that do we solve their problem? So for example, if you just expect that when MC, like I think LC is like always mention that MC downscale new things, right? But if you look at it, is that do you do exactly the same just to tell them that hey, so starting from now we are going to do this, and that's all. So maybe you tell a little bit of the things. But the thing about it is that the efforts that you have to put into driving the change to happen is that you have to go to every team, and by understanding their context and how would this tool be relevant to them, and telling them that that's how it's going to solve your problem, do you think that the team leaders are not going to do it? Because from my perspective, that if I'm the other functions team leaders and you can be there and tell me that how this tool is going to fix my function problem, definitely I will use it. So but just that the space is not happening, I think it's also partly because uh we never know that we have to do until that extent. But if you look into the element of changes that to make changes happen, that's actually one of it. Like people will only do it if they realize that it's actually beneficial to them. Okay. Yep. I think CU is JB is definitely one of it. CU, CU is I think CU way of recruiting is good. And the way of they are doing PDB is also very comprehensive. So I think if you are, because from CU side they are trying to incorporate competence model in PDP review. So if you're interested to know more, I think you can go to LCEB PM in CU, or any representative here from CU. You can just appear for a while. Okay, so any more questions? I can still answer your questions if you have. Okay, I think people are I think most questions are answered. So if you really have any questions that it pops into your mind later after this space, then just feel free to PM me. But just to take note, my laptop is dead recently, so it's being sent to my to service center to have diagnosis. So just to expect like my response rate is not going to be that fast, but it's not because I don't want to reply your message, okay? So just still PM me. I will definitely get back to you as soon as possible. So yeah, okay. So I think to sum it up is that if you look at things that we have been mentioning in this space regarding like TM process, team standards as a guide on how to make sure that team experience has been taken care of. The very good reference that you can find out is these are the resources that you can take note on. Okay, so yeah, so looking into team standards, like how to implement team standards effectively, I think one of the main resources that you can go into is definitely Blue Code. Okay, and TM process will be all these links. Okay, but just to take note that all these links are directly from AI. So there are certain contexts that maybe for us is not so relevant, but it's still fine. I think for me, in getting the general picture, it will still be very useful uh for your understanding towards TM as a function on how to support the organization. Okay, and uh just a little bit of I think experience sharing from my side is that I've been in Isaac since 1415. So basically, I think I've been observing like the changes of TM over the years. First thing. Second thing is that when I was trying to be apply for ESTs, yeah, Surface ESTs like for previous year, is that I did a lot of research in understanding like how other companies' recruitments works and how other companies' trainings works and those things. So those are the research that I actually been gone through. And if you study a little bit about HR, that talking about human resources information management, HRI system or management, HRIM, HRIS is that, and if you compare to the system that we already have in Isaac, is that we are actually very comprehensive in terms of implementing the basic infrastructures in an organization. Even if you even if you go out to other places like other companies or SMEs or even startups, you are not going to find the same infrastructure in their HR because their HR mostly are still stuck at uh, counting attendance and just submitting paycheck and what is that called? And approving leaves. So those are realistically what happened in other HR field in outside of the company. Definitely you cannot compare it with MNC like PwC or Mondelez. Those are exceptional, okay? But majority, 70% of the industry, HR industry, is still the same. So the question here is that if you are interested in this role, I think it's also to think about is that it's not for me is that it's not only a learning playground, but for me is that to really look at this role as the role that you can directly exper like experimenting different ways of doing things. And with that kind of mindset of prioritizing prioritizing your RC's performance or your organizational development, and don't forget about business strategies and members experience, I think that would definitely add more values to your own experience as well. Because if you keep thinking about just fulfilling the minimum but not going out of the box, you would definitely forever stuck at implementing the basics and not knowing how to break through of the process itself. So therefore, I think if you are even curious, wanted to validate what I've been saying, I think I really wanted you to go and validate it. Just go and randomly call your people, like your friends who are interning, or I don't know, like whatever way that if it can help you to validate my perspective, feel free to go for it and validate it. And for me, is that seriously take this experience as the experience that you can really experiment it practically, knowing more about how to do HR. Because I think in longer term wise, if you can't do it in Isaac, you don't expect that you can do it in HR consultants firm. Because right now we are dealing with members. Members are volunteers. You can't even convince like the youngsters in LCs on how to change and implement changes. Don't expect that you can go out to company and convince the people that are receiving paycheck and maybe they have more experience than us to change on what we want to change. So simple as that. I think uh, just take it as a very practical experiences in experimenting, but not just being very but not just stopping at getting knowledge and just knowing things. Okay. So this is the contact list. If you want to take a picture, you can take it, or you can just view back this. I think if you have Telegram, you can easily find our contact. So I have ESTs working under me and then working with me. So there are people that are currently in LCs as well. So definitely, if you want to know more about the specific process and the struggles that they have, then in implementing those processes, then I think definitely you can go for them. Okay. So I think that's all for today's space. So thank you for attending this space, and that's all. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. And thank you for attending. And again, PM is for people for organization. Yeah. So that's all. Bye, peeps.